Hello and welcome to livealittlehigher.com. This week we learn Parashat Emor. We read Parashat Emor, and in Parashat Emor it says in Leviticus 21:1, it says, God says to Moses, "Say to the priests, Aaron's sons, and you shall say to them, let no priest become ritually impure through contact with a dead person." So the purpose of the apparent redundancy in this verse, say to the priest, followed shortly by you shall say to them, is to enjoin adults with regards to minors. So really, what Moshe is telling Aaron, his brother, is to teach the younger generation of how they should behave, how they should conduct themselves in life. So the first say is addressed to Moses. The first God says to Moses is God saying to Moses, and you shall say to them, is an instruction to the priests to maintain their children's state of ritual purity. So in this literal sense, this pasuk, it's talking literally about the priests and their children, but in reality, it's talking to all the Jewish people, because all the Jewish people were a nation of priests. We were all supposed to be Kohanim, but because of the sins that we committed, we were taking this away from us. So this injunction holds the priest responsible for the children's behavior, not just their education. It's telling us, yes, you have to educate your children. You know, right now, it's interesting because right now, children are home. Parents are teaching their children, helping with the homeschooling through the Zoom classes and everything. So today, as we're speaking right now, the children have more contact with their home environment, and they're much more aware of the behavior of their parents inside the home 24 hours a day, in a moment of a lot of stress and uncertainty. And this really is the biggest lesson you can give your children. It's not so much that 1 + 1 is 2 and A, B, C, D, or if your older children are learning bigger, more knowledgeable things. The biggest lesson you can give your children at this moment, and this is what this pasuk is telling us, this is what it's telling us, is that yes, you have to teach your children about life. They have to learn things so they can go to the supermarket and know how much something is going to cost, and if they buy this plus this plus this, and in their lives, so they can have an awareness of money and awareness of how to read and write. It's important. But what this is telling us is that more than what the responsibility of a parent, more than teaching their children education, the biggest responsibility a parent has with their kids is to teach them good behavior, not just their education. So, and more generally speaking, it teaches that parents are obliged not just to impart knowledge to their children, but to ensure their children translate that knowledge into practice, what type of human beings they're gonna be. And right now, in these moments that we're living, in which we're all together for hours and hours and hours, till no end, what a better opportunity to teach your kids about the exemplary behavior of parents, that they should conduct themselves in such ways that this is what their children are gonna gain at this moment in their lives. These lessons are gonna be imparted in this, as long as we're having to be home, are gonna really mark a very big impression on them for the rest of their lives. So this obligation of parental supervision is specific to 3 areas of Jewish law, and it's the prohibition against eating insects, the prohibition of drinking blood, and the prohibition of ritual impurity, to do things that make a person impure. So its wider reading as a universal message to all educators can be informed by 3 instances from which the important lesson is born. So the first area of behavior that parents are asked to teach their children, that is very important, is that they should monitor that their children should not eat creepy crawlers. It's forbidden by the Torah. A Jew should never eat an insect, God forbid. It's really not, it's in the Torah. It's not kosher. We're forbidden from doing it. And And it's actually a biblical prohibition. And you would say, yeah, it sounds right, it sounds easy, like who's gonna eat an insect? But you would be amazed, you see how what people eat in other places. So it's not so easy also when your child is crawling, when he's in the floor all day, when you're in Central Park and you put your kid in the floor and he's an 8-month-old baby that's putting everything in his mouth, most likely he'll find a worm and he'll stick it inside of his mouth. So far more difficult is practicing the educational idea that this law represents. So according to the Talmud, the desire to eat insects is unnatural. This is not something natural, humanly natural, to want to eat an ant or a spider or something like that. And it's really motivated by a rebellious urge to act against Hashem, who forbade them to eat from these insects. So the bug eater is a representation of a child that does not possess the inclination to know and learn more. It's a kid that is happy with the status quo. He doesn't want to know about Hashem. He's not interested in learning about God. He resists and rebels against the educator and the educational system that offers the knowledge to him. So in a more general sense, it represents a person who is set in his or her own views and doesn't have space in his mind to learn something new. Encountering this disinterested student is very, how would you say, it's very frustrating for a teacher or for a parent when you want to teach something to somebody and the person really doesn't care, he doesn't want to learn. And I imagine that teachers are exposed to this many times in a classroom of 23 kids. Most likely they have at least one that is looking up and is really clueless of what's going on in the classroom, and it doesn't matter what the teacher does, what new incentives he brings, and how he's creative in the way of teaching. This kid is really a challenge to the teacher or to the parent, because there's no worse student than the one that doesn't want to learn. How can you teach something to somebody that doesn't want to learn? He's not interested. So the Torah choice of this unique context, as it is first called for education, it is way of proclaiming its first rule of education. And the first rule of education is that there is no such thing as a person who cannot be reached or redeemed. We are forbidden to view any child, doesn't matter the age, his knowledge, if he's intelligent or not intelligent, as an unteachable child. I heard once someone say that there's no bad students, there's bad teachers. Because a teacher, if he's a good teacher, he'll know how to get to the heart and the brain of this child. He just has to put the effort. It's a little more effort. But we should never give up on a student, because you never know when something is gonna go into his head and it's gonna inspire him, and then he'll change completely. So it says here that in 2003, Professor Alan Dershowitz addressed about his relationship with and reflections with the Lubavitcher Rebbe. And he said that about 15 or 20 years ago, he's talking this in 2003, so imagine 20 years before, he had the chutzpah, the audacity, in the worst sense of the word, to write an arrogant letter to the Rebbe. And he wrote this letter because he had read in a newspaper that the Lubavitcher Rebbe, or the Lubavitch movement, was honoring Jesse Helms. And there was no man in America that Professor Dershowitz hated more than this Jesse Helms. He despised him. And as a chairman of the Senate Foreign Relations Committee, he absolutely stood for everything that he was opposed to in those days. So including being strongly against the state of Israel. This Jesse Helms was someone that really was very against Israel. So he wrote a letter, Professor Dershowitz wrote a letter to the Rebbe, in essence, and he put it in his letter like this. He said, how can you honor a man who stands for everything that is opposed to the Jewish values in America? And surprisingly, he received a letter back from the Rebbe a very respectful letter, a letter that he cherishes still today, and he lectured him, but in the nicest way, telling him that you never give up on anybody. You never, ever, ever give up on somebody. Today, Jesse Helms may be against Israel, but you never know if tomorrow, depending on how Jewish people treat him, he can change the way he thinks about the state of Israel. And a person that can be an enemy of Israel can become suddenly a champion for Israel. So Rabbi Dershowitz ends telling that that the rest of the story is known, that at the end this Jesse Helms, although there's many issues he still doesn't share with him, but nevertheless he became a good friend of Israel, and he helps Israel. So the second area of behavior that parents are obliged to really look after their kids and police them about it is the child's intake of blood. Jewish religion forbids, it's a prohibition of the Torah, of ingesting blood. We are prohibited from it. We're not vampires. And it's interesting because in the past, Jews have been targeted, and it has been said in anti-Semitic remarks that the Jewish people killed Christian babies and they take out their blood and they drink it for Pesach and they make matzahs with it. So this is farthest from the truth. Anybody that knows about Jewish religion knows that Jewish people are forbidden from drinking milk. So a revealing comment in the Midrash suggests that there was a time when Jewish people were animal blood consumers in the times of Egypt. They were very much affected and assimilated to the Egyptian culture, and they used to drink blood. They used to do this. So hence the verse, it says, be strong not to eat blood. What it means is that there is an urge to do it, as if it takes courage to cut down on blood. But it did take strength and courage, since over time it has become a part of the Jewish appetite and diet. So those blood eating represents bad habits entrenched in one's characters and psyche, or a lifestyle that is not consistent with the refined ideals of Judaism. Here too we encounter a challenge common to educators. No matter what one may teach his or her charges of the elevated atmosphere one may create in the classroom, so much of a child's molding depends on his home, in the environment that he grows up to. Like a kid can go to the most refined school where he's learning the most incredible refined midot, character traits, but nevertheless, if he comes to a house where the father is hitting the mother, where the mother is always drunk, where all these things are going on, it's very hard to rectify this in the psyche of a child. It must feel so futile for the teacher to teach one thing at a school only to have it discounted or contradicted at home. It's funny because when we came to live in Miami, my husband, my children, and I, in 1998, I think it's 22 years already, I was very secular, very open-minded. I didn't keep kosher. I didn't keep a kosher home. Nevertheless, we ended up putting our children in a Jewish day school. And the Jewish day school was kosher. It was very strict in kashrut, and in the kids wearing tzitzits and kippas and the girls wearing skirts. And I thought that everybody in that school was kosher and religious. And I said to my husband, you know, if the kids are going to a kosher school and their environment in school is kosher and they're teaching them about kashrut and they're learning about this, how can they come to a house where they don't eat kosher? We need to change this. We need to make the home kosher. And that's what I did. I made my home kosher, and that was the first step in my teshuvah. And by eating kosher, then everything else followed, and we're here today. But what it means, what this is teaching us, is that it has to be hand in hand. Like if you put your kid in a certain school, in a religious school, you cannot be in a non-religious home. You cannot live in a house where you don't practice anything, because what messages are you sending to your child? So this equally, if not especially true, of adult education, the added challenge in trying to influence older people is that having reached a certain comfort zone in life, they are less prone to the youthful openness and excitement necessary to achieve real challenge. So the older you get, the more set you're in your ways, the more comfortable you're in your lifestyle, and it's harder to penetrate the soul of that person. Yet again, the Torah message is clear here again. Don't underestimate the power of education. It can be very hard, but it's not impossible. You never know which insight or story or inspiration a person can get from a person, and then suddenly they can change their whole life forever. You never know. Maybe one word you say, maybe one action you made, maybe a way you behaved in a certain situation. People are looking. People are looking. So we see here that as far as adult students go, some of Judaism's most prominent scholars, leaders, got off to a late start, like Abraham, Moses, Jonah, Rabbi Akiva, Onkelos, to name a few. And then we have the third area and the last one of Jewish law that calls for parental supervision, and is the one referred to the commandment to maintain the purity of priestly children. According to Jewish thought, the laws of impurity are not governed by the laws of logic. They're illogical, they're hukim, and they represent Judaism that are super rational laws. So some people think that if it's not logical, then you cannot teach it to a child. Like, you have to start with logic. And they think that first you have to help the kid connect to logic so they can then go to faith. And we see that the notion could be no further from the truth. Firstly, children have a special capacity for faith. Kids are closer to Hashem than we are. They came just a little while ago, so they're more connected to the supra-rational and to Hashem. If you talk to a kid about God, for them it's not something weird that you're talking about. For them it's very, very real. So we see here that if ever there is a time to teach a Jewish child faith, it's in her formative years. The younger you teach them about Hashem, the younger you teach them about having faith and emunah, and showing them Hashem's miracles, and talking about miracles, and talking about how Hashem helps you in this incredible way and in that incredible way, then the more likely your child is going to be more connected to the truth, to Hashem, to the faith. Indeed, so important was it to one Hasidic Rebbe that his children begin their education by studying the miraculous aspects of the Torah. When he found out that his children's teacher had skipped the account of creation, he had them immediately removed from that classroom, because the creation of the world is supra-rational. Imagine, God spoke and He created. You have to have a fantastic mind to believe in that accounting of the Torah. Most people believe in the theory of evolution, and that there was a big bang, and that the world was created by an explosion, whatever, because it's scientifically proved, and the logic comes into place. It's very hard for people to believe that God created the world. So the same perspective applies when introducing uninitiated Jews to Judaism. One approach is to begin teaching them the logics of the Torah, the logical part of the Torah, so you don't overwhelm them with the knowledge of the supra-rational. And the truth is that this won't take them anywhere. They will never end up being kosher. They will never end up going to the mikveh and doing these crazy things that look like from like acts of voodoo to them, because for them it's like supra-rational. Like, it doesn't make any logic that a woman has to go to a pool of water to purify herself so she can be back with her husband. If you think about it, it doesn't make any sense at all. Or that you cannot mix milk and meat, or that you cannot wear a garment that has both linen and wool sewn together. Where is that? Like, what logic is into that? So firstly, we have to teach the basis of faith. Faith is the most important thing. If we're not connected to our emunah and our bitachon, then there's no relationship with God. There's no way. And Judaism is really not a religion. It's not a religion. It's a relationship. And it has to be lived in that way. So this philosophy is fundamentally flawed, as it introduces God through the mind, not the soul, essentially declaring logic as the basis of the Jewish faith, and not faith as the basis of the Jewish logic. First, we're believers, children of believers. This is what a Jew is. So who better to learn from than God, who chose Genesis, Bereshit, as the starting point of education, beginning his children's schooling with the awesome and supernatural account of creation. So I want to leave you here, wish you a blessed week, and I want to remind you that on Shabbat we are going to be celebrating Pesach Sheni. It's the 15th of ER. It's 1 month after Pesach, and that day is a day of second chances. There were some Jews that when they left Egypt, they were not able to participate in the Paschal offering because they were impure, because they had been burying the dead that had died before they left Egypt. They were burying them, and they didn't have time to purify themselves and offer the sacrifice. So they missed it. So they said to God that it was not fair, that they weren't able to offer the Paschal lamb, and Hashem gave them another opportunity. A month later, on the 15th of ER, he gave them a Pesach Sheni. It's second chances. Hashem always gives us a second opportunity, and it's a custom on that day that we should eat some matzah. We should eat matzah to remind ourselves that Hashem always is waiting for us to turn around and give us another chance. So I want to wish you a blessed week, and remember, live a little higher. Thank you.